Hello and welcome to my Rector's Ramblings for Sunday the 10th of May. I hope you've had a good couple of days, the last few days. We celebrated VE Day on Friday, and many people, despite lockdown, were still able to have street parties by sticking to the end of their driveways but still meeting with neighbours. So I hope you were able to celebrate a couple of days ago. The weather's been great as well recently, hasn't it? We've had some nice days of sunshine, some nice warm weather at the beginning of May, and it's been really nice to enjoy that. But being Britain, then the weather's going to change soon. Looking at the forecast then this evening, well, the wind's going to start veering around to the northeast, and it's going to be really cold tonight, getting down to about 1 or 2 degrees by the morning. The weather is changing. For Jesus' disciples at this point in their journey with Jesus, the weather was also changing, you might say. They had enjoyed lots of days of sunny spells with, well, the occasional shower and downpour here and there, but it had been mostly sunny recently. But I wonder if they could sense a change in the weather coming. Prior to today's passage, Jesus had taken the extraordinary decision to get on his hands and knees and wash his disciples' feet, something that no self-respecting rabbi would ever dream of doing. He did the job of a humble servant. That was something strange. And then he predicted that one of his disciples, would betray him. Well, who was going to do that? And then he told them that he was going to be going away for a while and they couldn't come with him initially, but then they'd be able to join him. And then he spoke about Peter. Peter, who's, right up there in the pecking order of disciples. He said that Peter would deny knowing him. Jesus is saying and doing some really strange things at the moment. It must have felt to the disciples that change was in the air. Some insecurities were creeping in. They were no longer certain of what the future would hold. They had lots of questions to ask. They wanted more information. They wanted more proof from Jesus. There are many similarities with our own situation. Things that we were once certain of and sure of are now no longer guaranteed. Things we took for granted have been stripped away. We want to know more. We want to know more information. We want to know when these restrictions will be lifted and how that will happen and how long it will take. Well, at 7 p.m. this evening, Boris Johnson, our Prime Minister, will give us a bit more information. Although much of what he's going to say, I think, has already been released to the press, and so we already have a fairly good idea what he's going to announce later on today. In addition to all these questions that we have, people are also wanting to know when our churches will be open again for us to go in for private prayer, just to go in and use the space. People are wanting to know when we can go back and start gathering as a congregation and holding our Sunday services together. Now, I can't give you the answers to those questions at the moment. All I can say is that I expect that it will be a gradual and a very careful process over the coming weeks and months. We will just have to sit tight with those questions unanswered for now. What I can offer you is what Jesus said in his reading today to his unsettled, worried and confused disciples. He said, "Do not let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God. Trust also in me." That's what Jesus said. Do not let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God. Trust also in me. He offered them words of reassurance that they would not be abandoned. And on the contrary, he declared that he was getting a place ready for them in his Father's house. Jesus pointed them to a future which is secure. However, the disciples would still witness things like Gethsemane, the arrest of Jesus, Jesus being flogged and executed and buried. Trust in God? Trust in me? Really? Now? When it's all gone so horribly wrong? I wonder if those words of Jesus now sounded really hollow and empty, with no substance to these confused and frightened disciples. But then came resurrection, Jesus being with them once more, and the promise of a helper to come. Do not let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God, trust also in me. It was no longer an empty promise or statement or invitation. It was a saying to be held onto. In the darkest of days, Jesus could be trusted. We see the truth of that instruction in the life of Stephen. Stephen was the first Christian martyr. We had the story read from the Acts of the Apostles. It's one of the set readings for today. As he was being stoned, it doesn't appear that his heart was troubled. In fact, his death mirrored Jesus's in many ways. As he was dying, as he was being stoned, as he was being executed, he forgave those who were throwing the stones at him. He could see Jesus at the right-hand side of God. His heart did not appear to be troubled. Instead, he seemed to trust. Speaking to a variety of people during this lockdown period, it seems to me that some people are actually quite enjoying how things are going at the moment. They're having a good time. They're enjoying the quieter roads. They're enjoying the peace and quiet. They're enjoying getting out in the countryside and having some nice walks in this lovely weather. There are many others who are struggling in many ways, be it financial or mentally or emotionally, all kinds of different ways that people are finding this actually a really hard time. Jesus' promise and his instruction to the disciples not to let their hearts be troubled is one which holds true as much for us today as it did for them all those years ago. We don't know how this current crisis will unfold or how long it will take. The storm will pass, but it may be some time. Do not let your hearts be troubled is not a promise of an easy life. It is an invitation to trust in God, to trust in his Son who gave his life for us. Whatever happens in the future, whenever we feel that our hearts are beginning to get troubled, then may we learn to trust and to find security in Jesus, who died and was raised, that we might have hope and a future. Amen.